And I'm going to call the meeting to order. I want to thank all those in our audience tonight who've come out to join us. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item, which is the minutes of the Town Hall meeting on Saturday, April 20th. Prior to moving a recommendation, I'd like to note that there is a correction that needs to be made on page 9 of those minutes. In the top, it refers to the Coquitlam neighborhood plan, and what we'll do is make amendments to refer to the Austin Heights neighborhood plan, which is more appropriate for that discussion item. So I'd like to put forward as a recommendation that the minutes of the Town Hall meeting held on Saturday, April 20th be approved as amended. So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Sikora. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, May 6th. The recommendation is that these minutes be approved. So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is the minutes of the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, April 17th. The recommendation is that these minutes be received.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Hodge. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, I have a question. Perhaps the committee chair, Councillor Asmussen, could help me, or maybe the clerk who is there. It's dealing with item number 3, City Hall cultural displays, and that, for those listening at home, the Council requested the Multicultural Advisory Committee to provide feedback on the potential use of public spaces in City Hall for cultural group displays, as discussed at the February, MAC meeting. Now, is these minutes in front of us, is this going to be the full extent? I'm not sure how much more discussion there's going to be. Is the committee working forward to formal declarations or decision, or I don't know what the situation is.
Mr. Clerk.
Unless Councillor Asmussen would like to respond first. What Council asked was that the display outside, the Nowruz table was put for, half-sit table was there to celebrate Nowruz, and that staff, on a one-time only basis, and that staff proceed to study the issue of such displays on a more regular basis within City Hall. So there is a staff group on that, and this was simply them reporting to the Multiculturalism Committee in order to get some feedback in order to prepare a more fulsome report.
Councillor Asmussen. Second.
So, okay. I thought, for some reason I had the impression that the committee was going to come up with some solid recommendations of some sort that perhaps we would have to endorse or something.
I think we referred it to the committee. Would it be up to the committee to come up with that? Did Councillor Asmussen or? Well,
just to say that and Mr. Hansen's here also, that the committee has had 2 meetings on this and has gone through quite an extensive discussion on this and has come up with a parameters of the cultural display, how the cultural displays and what should be in the cultural display. So there's a lot of guidance that the committee has given through these discussions to staff to come back with a bylaw or more of a policy on cultural displays within the city. And I don't know if Mr. Johansson has anything else to add to that, but that's...
Well, just on that point, I'm then a little confused about what exactly the committee is saying based on these bullet points. They talk about the difficulty of separating culture and religion, but did they say it should be done anyway to try to separate religion out or not? Or what was the recommendation there? That's one of the primary issues that I think we face here. But they also talk about, and they're more clear on displays should be about celebrating cultures and not national celebrations. So they're clear there, but not as clear with culture and religion. So I'm not sure what they said there.
I suspect where we're at, though, is in approval of the minutes. The minutes probably accurately reflect the wide-ranging discussion, and we may want to ask at some point in a committee meeting of the chair the question, like where are we at with this issue, and that item can be raised at that point. It can be raised here. I have no objection to this, but it's up to you.
So, in some, where was your suggestion that it
could be raised as an agenda item at the beginning of committee, for example?
Okay.
I see. Okay.
Councillor Asmussen.
Just to clarify, the committee did agree that religion should be, but separated out, and proselytizing of religion should not be part of it. But they said a lot of times religion intertwines some parts of culture. And so what they're saying is they want religion and the promotion of religions moved out of it. But sometimes religion and culture are really, really hard to completely separate. And I think, Carl, I think that's what we're trying to. Yep. That's what we're saying.
So if that's the case, that if there is actually an intent that they do want to separate religion out of it, but they recognize it's difficult, should not the minutes reflect that?
Well, I think as the mayor said, that the minutes reflect the discussion, that there was no motion passed.
Well, there was no motion passed about celebrating cultures and not national celebrations either, but it's very clear what that intent was. I don't think it's clear in these minutes.
Typically, this is the approval of the minutes motion portion of the meeting, typically when the words discussion ensued precede a bunch of bullets, that meant that one member of the committee raised on each one of those items. And sometimes there was consensus on the item, sometimes it was simply a broad-ranging discussion that included the group with the display should be responsible for replacing or whatever. So I suspect that what needs to happen now is that staff can report back at a committee meeting or at a council meeting when this is on the agenda, but they have difficulty reporting on the policy decision when we're only trying to figure out whether the minutes reflected what happened at the meeting.
Okay.
And if I may, Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead.
Excuse me. So at the meeting, we presented a PowerPoint that asked a series of questions. Again, that was based on a previous discussion that we had with the committee on this item. And we're taking the feedback from the committee, and we'll be coming back to council with a series of recommendations on this for council's consideration.
I look forward to it. Mr. Clerk.
And just to confirm the point that was raised, bullets following discussion ensued is exactly as described, that it could be any number of discussion points raised by individual members. You may often see a series of bullets, some of which contradict the other because there are two different opinions within a committee. I think in this particular instance, you'll rarely see, I would say from the clerk's office perspective, words like the fact that, because sometimes there is matters of interpretation or there's matters of belief. I think the key point here is the bullet or the paragraph underneath the chair noted where it says the manager of community planning thanked the committee members for their feedback and advised that the suggestions provided will be considered should council direct that a policy be developed. And I think that is the wrap up of the type of discussion that was taking place at this meeting.
Comfortable there?
Well, just a further point. Generally, yes. So on that last paragraph that you suggested, Manager Community Planning thanked the members for their feedback and advised that suggestions will be considered should council direct that a policy be developed. So the next step is that you're coming back with a recommended policy. Haven't we already said that we want to have a policy? I thought we sort of already said we wanted a policy, so anyway, that's...
We will be reporting back with a series of recommendations, including if council wants to proceed with the policy, these are some of the policy points that we should include in that. And then we would take that away, take the feedback away, and then come back with a firm policy for council adoption.
Yeah. The committee can't be making policy.
Oh, I know the committee can't make policy.
And anything we need to bring back to council for their consideration and move forward on that.
I understand that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I'm
Just
satisfied now.
Add within that context that the council director of the committee considered the issue, and the committee itself may make recommendations that not to proceed in this direction or proceed in this direction with these limitations, and that is when council would make the decision to implement a policy or not, or direct council staff to develop a policy.
And among the options at that point would be to ask the committee to come up with a policy that we can ratify.
Yes.
That's one of the options, for example. We didn't do that yet.
Right. Okay.
We good? The motion is the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is the minutes of the Sustainability and Environmental Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, April 18th. Recommendations that these minutes be received.
Moved by Councillor Nicholson, second by Councillor Asmundson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns amendments to the wild or exotic animal prohibition bylaw. This is bylaw 3838. The recommendation from the committee is that council direct staff to include all non-native turtles, green frogs, bullfrogs, and snakehead fish to Schedule A of Bylaw 3838, and to develop an outreach component for pet owners, educators, and retailers, and to maintain a list of prohibited species in Coquitlam that is consistent with provincial legislation.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Asmundson. Councillor Reid on the motion.
Oh, there's staff putting up their hands, but what I wanted to make sure that when people are out educating all the pet owners and retailers, et cetera, that they make sure that this is just an addition or an amendment to our wild animal prohibition, not the whole list. It's not just frogs and snakes and stuff. We have a whole list of exotic animals, is what I'm saying. This is just an amendment, so I didn't want anyone to think it's just these 2 or 3 things.
Yep. No, there is a long list.
Yeah.
These 2 or 3 things would be added to that
Yes.
with this motion. Thank you. I do want to ask Council's indulgence on one element. I'm reminded. The wording here is to develop an outreach component. We may wish to have staff report back instead, to report back on an outreach component for pet owners that would allow us to consider the cost of the outreach component, because right now it's not in the motion. And so so the motion, if council agrees, is that it now reads, and to report on an outreach component. All agreement? Okay. So the motion. Any other discussion on the motion? Councillor Nicholson on the motion.
I would just make the point that the last piece of the motion is intended to make it easier for us to keep up to date. There is a provincial list of prohibited species, and the idea is that as that list changes, those changes would be presented to us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sounds good. And it probably doesn't include all of the species on my exotic animal tie.
Well, I think it's your tie that should be prohibited, Your Worship.
That's about the pile.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 concerns the citywide official community plan amendment bylaw number 4398. This is the regional context statement. The 3-part recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam citywide official community plan amendment bylaw number 4398. That bylaw number 4398 be referred to a public hearing, and that bylaw number 4398 be referred to the City of Burnaby, City of Port Coquitlam, City of Port Moody, the City of New Westminster, the Coquitlam First Nation, the Agricultural Land Commission, and TransLink, with a request for comment by June 17th. We have introductory comments by the General Manager of Planning and Development, followed by a presentation by the Manager of Community Planning and Planner 1.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Hodge.
Question.
Go ahead, please. Who's going first?
Your Worship,
Okay.
I'll just be very...
Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening. I'll be very brief. What we have here for you tonight is a bylaw amendment to the official community plan to take out the current regional context statement that relates back to the old LRSP and replace it with a new one. We came before council back earlier this year with a draft that was considered by council in instruction to go out and consult, which we've done with a number of agencies and parties. We've got some feedback on that, and Carl and Andrew will go through that in a minute and indicate how we would propose to respond to that feedback. And so we're here tonight to update council on that and to bring forward this OCP amending bylaw, and if council's in support, it would then carry on for formal referrals and to a public hearing, all with the target, the intention being getting it into Metro Vancouver by their July 31st deadline for regional context statement submissions.
Will you do it by question?
Carl.
Thanks, Jim. Good evening, Your Worship and Council.
Councillor Reid.
This is a long item, and I'm wondering if we would be better served by just asking questions, or did we have a proposal on the whole thing? I don't know, Your Worship.
Well, staff have prepared a presentation that may well enlighten some people at home.
Okay, go ahead.
And both of the people in the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're pleased to be back before you today with the city's Regional Context Statement, or RCS, which we are presenting to Council for first reading as an official community plan, or OCP amendment bylaw. Today, Andrew Merrill, Planner 1 and Project Manager for the RCS, and myself will provide an overview of the report before you, which includes a summary of the feedback we've received from a round of initial consultation on the RCS and details updates that we've made to the document for Council's review and consideration. We'll start off by first providing a little background on the RCS. The RCS is essentially a policy bridge between the city's official community plan, or OCP, and the regional growth strategy, or RGS. And basically, it shows how a city's OCP policy is consistent with a regional growth strategy. And all municipalities under the Local Government Act must adopt an RCS within 2 years of RGS adoption. So the deadline for having our RCS into Metro Board is July 29th of this year, which is 2 years after the adoption of the RGS. Okay, so briefly in terms of the structure, what we've done is we've updated Part 1, Chapter 1 of the OCP to do this. Section 1.4 in the report, attached to the report that you have, summarizes the relationship between the OCP and the 5 RGS goals. There's also 2 tables in there, one of which is Table 1 is a concordance table, which details all the OCP policies that demonstrate consistency with the regional growth strategy. We also have population projections and a series of schedules that show regional land use designations, urban and local centers, and good movements routes. We have a couple of new features that we'd like to bring forward as a part of this RCS. First off is designating Coquitlam as the city's first frequent transit development area, or FTDA. And this is an area to focus additional urban growth, additional density around the Evergreen Line. The Coquitlam area is the only future SkyTrain station not already in an urban center. So we want to make sure that we're putting that designation in there. It'll require a minor amendment to the RGS, a Type 3 amendment, which is a 50+1 board vote and no regional public hearing. It's something that's supported by Metro staff and TransLink staff. And we're also proposing to put Fraser Mills in as a local center, again, a minor Type 3 amendment. Okay, so this is just showing in Southwest Coquitlam, we have the Evergreen Line corridor here, the TDS corridor, the Transit Development Strategy corridor, showing the 2 town centers that we have in the RGS. We have the Lougheed Town Center, and we also have the city's regional city center. And this shows the new FTDA area around the Coquitlam station. And these boundaries are consistent with the TDS core shoulder boundaries. And here's the new local center that we're adding as part of this RCS, Fraser Mills. Again, identifying this in the regional growth strategy. Okay, so in terms of feedback that we've heard from our staff referrals, the city's OCP is what we've heard. Yes, it is generally consistent with the RGS, and the feedback we've received has been generally positive. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Andrew Merrill, who's going to take us through that feedback and the updates that we've made to the RCS.
Okay. Thank you, Carl. So I'm going to review the feedback that we've received on the draft regional context statement. And there were, from Metro Vancouver's point of view, there was kind of one major area of feedback and then 8 smaller minor ones. So the major one was in the earlier draft of the regional context statement, we had indicated a potential future urban containment boundary amendment in the concordance table. Metro staff noted that indicating an amendment to the UCB at this time was premature and could indicate that the Metro Board somehow endorses this future possibility when they endorse our regional context statement. And a more appropriate time to discuss a potential future amendment would be after the planning studies that support that amendment are complete. So what we've done is we've shifted that statement out of the regional context statement into a new section, section 1.5 of the OCP, that's directly adjacent to the RCS section, which is in section 1.4. And this will still clearly indicate this future possibility to Metro Vancouver without requiring their endorsement at this time. And this just shows all of the regional land use designations in Coquitlam, and then zooming in at this area here along Pipeline Road to the west of the Coquitlam River, an area that's currently used for sand and gravel extraction. That's the area that we were considering this potential future urban containment boundary amendment. And this area is proposed to be included in the upcoming Hazel-Harper visioning process that will better determine what some potential future land uses for this area might be. Through detailed consultation with Metro Vancouver staff, they also had identified kind of 8 other minor areas of feedback that I'm going to quickly go through. The first is on business park development. The front section of our OCP, which is now 11 years old, talks about developing business parks, and some clarification is needed for Metro Vancouver that when Coquitlam refers to business parks, we're talking primarily about industrial parks, not office parks. And the city's intention is to direct office uses to our urban centers like the city center. So this clarification will be rolled into a future OCP amendment. Following on that, Metro Vancouver staff also suggested that we could have stronger language excluding office uses from our industrial areas. And we note that Phase 2 of the industrial zone review should clarify where office uses are allowed in industrial zones. Looking at work, live, and live work uses, Metro Vancouver staff noted that the RGS excludes residential uses from all mixed employment areas, and the Schoolhouse Street area, which has some policy that indicates it could allow live-work uses, is a mixed employment area. So we propose that the city should consider developing a vision and plan for the whole Fraser Gateway employment corridor, and the issue of live-work uses would be better clarified through that process. And then looking at agriculture, Metro Vancouver staff suggested the city may want to consider developing policy around agricultural economic development opportunities, and our response is that the city may consider doing that through a future planning process, but we won't be doing it as part of the context statement. The last couple issues were the noted Metro Vancouver staff noted that ROCP has numerous references to the green zone, which was a significant part of the previous livable region strategic plan. And the majority of the green zone is now contained within the conservation and recreation land use designations. So the city will amend references to the green zone through a future OCP update process. Metro Vancouver staff also suggested that we may want to have additional references to the regional greenway network, and we note that all municipal portions of the regional greenway network are included in the draft master trail plan, which was recently presented to council, and elements from that plan are incorporated into the OCP through our area and neighborhood planning processes. Last two things were, one was on housing affordability, and Metro Vancouver staff agree that our housing affordability policies are generally consistent with the RGS. However, they suggested 2 areas on parking reductions and developing location criteria for purpose-built rental and affordable housing projects that the city may want to consider through its housing affordability strategy. So our response is that we may consider exploring those policy areas through the housing affordability strategy process, but that process is the appropriate vehicle to look at those, not the context statement. And lastly, looking at waterway access for industry, Metro Vancouver staff noted that there's an inherent conflict, both in our OCP but also in their RGS, between the desire for public access to waterways through trails and greenways and maintaining waterway access for industry. So our staff response is that we would consider developing policy to balance those 2 competing interests through a future planning process. New Westminster indicated they had no concerns with our draft regional context statement, and Port Coquitlam has some concerns about regional transportation impacts, particularly with traffic coming off the new communities in Burke Mountain. And they would also like some stronger references to the future Lincoln Avenue crossing in Fremont Street. We note that the city is committed to working with Port Coquitlam on regional transportation, and that there are already numerous policy references to both Lincoln Avenue and Fremont Street, both in our OCP and in the Strategic Transportation Plan, and those policies are referenced in the context statement. TransLink staff support designating Burquitlam as an FTDA and note that this makes good use of a major transportation investment. TransLink also noted that the draft context statement had placed a higher priority on Partington Creek and Fraser Mills as potential future FTDAs. So we've amended the context statement to indicate that all of our local centers, including Partington Creek, Fraser Mills, Austin Heights, and Maillardville, could become potential future FTDAs following an appropriate planning study. Looking at the next steps in this process, we're here tonight for Council to consider first reading of this bylaw. Should that happen, we'll send formal referrals off to our adjacent municipalities, and that includes a staff referral to Metro staff to help build on our good working relationship that we've developed thus far. And then a public hearing would be scheduled for late June. Following the public hearing, Council could consider second and third reading of the bylaw, and then we would formally submit to Metro Vancouver in time for the deadline. After that deadline, the Metro Board will consider the regional context statement, and then it will come back to Council, and they can consider final reading of the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor O'Neill.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think I successfully passed my freshman year here. At least I got a good grip on issues dealing with the city and the communities. But I'll tell you, this one makes my head hurt a little. There's a real big framework here that, you know, I understand everything in little bits and pieces, but it's the bigger, broader picture. So I just need a little explanation here. So as you said, the RCS shows how the citywide official community plan is consistent with the RGS. So it's that bridge showing how it is consistent. And ... And when it is not consistent, the implication is that we have to change our OCP. Is that right? Or is there another option?
Yeah, the usual response to that is if there's an area that's not consistent, either the municipality makes a decision or the local government makes a decision to, you know, through a future OCP update to you know, find some common ground between the OCP and the RGS and make it more consistent. Or a local government can say, well, yeah, we're not consistent at this point, and at some time in the future we may consider working towards that through a future OCP update or a neighborhood plan update.
Well, what happens if a city doesn't even want to say that? It says, no, we're not consistent there. We don't buy that. So what happens then? Do we ask them to change their RGS? So there's a bridge?
Well, that's...
So I just wonder what, you know, I think I know what we're talking about here.
There's an escalating scale.
But is that part of actually, is that built into the system that we can say the RGS needs to be changed, not our OCP?
Your Worship, if I could, being a veteran of that, the last campaign on this one, yes, as Carl explained, the legislation calls for this consistency.
Right.
But that's not to say it doesn't always have to be, you know, top down. There can be some bottom up. And in fact, you know, the item of flagging for Metro Vancouver's notice, an interest in exploring expanding or changing the urban containment boundary, we think is an important signal. So certainly in staff's mind, it's not impossible that an idea or a desire coming from a municipality that results in an OCP amendment would not go forward as a proposed change to the regional plan. It's not just a one-way street in terms of the relationship. But at this point in time, what we're obligated to do under the legislation is show how our OCP aligns with the new regional growth strategy, and for the most part, it does pretty well.
Perhaps I could.
Sure.
If there is a disagreement at the end of the day, we would then have another formal dispute, and there would be another dispute resolution process. And that was one of the issues that we highlighted when we challenged, and we were the only municipality that challenged the whole existence of the RGS the first time around. One of the things that I think we got out of that was a clarification of the future dispute resolution process that would be used if there was a future dispute. Now, that dispute resolution process was not pretty. But if we don't seek common ground, if we don't come together, and I think we're close enough in this case that we will come, but if we were not, and we didn't want to, there would be a dispute resolution process. And the process that we spearheaded last time helped clarify the type of future dispute resolution process that would come to be if there was a fundamental dispute resolution. That's correct, right, Jim? Because I remember we went through all that clarification of future dispute resolution process. That's one of the things that we asked for. Their initial position was that, it would be easy. In effect, it was not easy. And it was quite difficult, but it became very clear what it would be like if you went into that process. So now maybe, Jim, you could just highlight, because that was one of our 5 points.
But before we get to that, what are the consequences if we just say, you know what, we've gone as far as we want to go, we're showing you how in 98% of our OCP it's consistent with the RGS. We just don't want to do this other 2%, and that would generate a dispute of some sort in a dispute resolution system. But then what would be the consequences against Coquitlam if we were to lose that resolution? And could we be forced by Metro or the province to change our OCP against our wishes?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Okay, that brings a lot of clarity.
It wouldn't be easy for them either, though, and they couldn't do it unilaterally. There is a process to go through, including arbitration, including independent folks that look at it, including appeals to the minister, all those kind of things.
Okay, you know, just with that answer, I don't think I need any more explanation. I think I needed to get to the bottom line there and to see how the system worked. Okay, thank you. That's fine.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I'm glad you asked that, because that really is the crux of the whole thing. And up till last year, Councillor O'Neill, we had something called, okay, in any event, last year we went through a horrible, horrible, horrible experience with the regional growth context, which is no longer just a land use plan. It's actually legislated power by a regional district for us to follow suit and do whatever the heck they feel we should be doing. And there's still parts of it that we fought, and I think we did a very good job. We were the only city that did. But I have to tell you, there's a couple of cities now that are sitting there with the very problems that were identified by Coquitlam, and they're sitting there and having to go through this long process to get them adjudicated, and it's wrong. So I just have a few questions that I'd like to ask. And when we went in with the RGS, we had Fraser Mills, I thought, as residential and mixed employment, didn't we? Or employment generating lands or mixed employment. So why is it now being called local something? Give me that one back.
Certainly, Your Worship. Actually, the Fraser Mills area is part of the general urban
Yes, I know
land use
that.
designation, so it's sort of sitting there.
But didn't we put labels on it of mixed employment or employment generating lands, or something like that?
No, the mixed employment, through the chair, is the area to the north and to the east. It's much of the industrial park lands in there. So
Yeah.
Fraser Mills itself is part of the general urban, which is the broadest land use category you can find under the regional plan. The advantage in having it as a center, because remember there's a hierarchy of centers in the regional plan.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I thought we labeled it, didn't you?
No, it's in our OCP, I think we have it as a waterfront village center, but in terms of the regional plan, we wanted to make sure it was on that map too. Yeah. Just as with Austin Heights and in other areas in the city, we want to give them some attention, some profile, some prominence that enables that mixed use, higher density development, and it also is starting to put the stake in the ground for some for transit services in the future, and that's much the story behind the Pardon Creek designation.
That's the key thrust there.
I don't remember hearing the local, whatever it was, the little thing. They have all these little names, and you have to watch what you call them, or you're in real trouble. You're in another arbitration for something. I wanted to talk about the office in industrial areas. One of the reasons we looked at our industrial areas and changed all the zones was because we found out in some of our lesser industrial type areas, we needed more office. We used to have a 25% component, and we wanted to go up higher. So we've resolved that, have we, that we can go higher?
Your Worship, I would suggest that was one of our small victories when we were dealing with the RGS, was to get that recognition that in portions of that area down south of the freeway, a mixed employment land use designation in the regional plan made more sense rather than a strict industrial. There's the casino there, there's some big box retailers, and it's kind of a mix. And so in the end, the Metrovan staff went along with that. So having that mixed employment designation, regional designation, to my mind, gives us the flexibility when we come forward with the consolidated industrial zones, some which may allow for a greater portion of office.
So a lot of the M9s can go in that, and you're happy with that?
I think we'll have consistency there.
Okay, on to the live, work, live, and they're telling us we should move our schoolhouse designation. It's been in there for a long time. And if we have to move ours, what about Burnaby and Vancouver? One of the reasons we put work, live, and live, work in was because we had, at the time, we were starting to get people out here, costume designers and set developers when the film industry was going big, and they really like to, I actually had leased one in Burnaby myself, and what they like is they like to have the bottom that they can do all the work on, but because it's so expensive, the costumes and that, they like to have an apartment upstairs that they sort of can work, live, work, whatever you call it. So we designated a little spot on Schoolhouse for our city. And can we still retain that? I mean, whether it's successful or not?
At this point, we're proposing not to, I mean, we're not taking that off.
Good for you. Okay, now I'm on a roll.
Fair enough. But it's something that we've noted that would be part of the Fraser Employment Gateway review process that we'd like to undertake.
On page, you talk about the regional greenway network, and they noted that our OCP should more strongly reference municipal portions and connections and all that stuff. But it goes down to once adopted, so we haven't fully, is this a timing issue with us? It's basically timing?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that was good. Parking reductions. Oh, I just love this one all to bits. On housing affordability.
Your time is up, Councillor Reid.
Parking reductions and location criteria for purpose-built rental and/or affordable housing. I'm sorry, but I realize they want all this built in, you know, right around a SkyTrain, and that's really nice of them, except that's the most expensive land any city has. So that really doesn't make a lot of sense. So how are we doing on that one? You mentioned it and it flew by. Are we going to be able to play with that a bit?
We've made no commitments to go that way. Basically what we've said is that council is undertaking a process to develop a housing affordability strategy, and those are things that may be considered as a part of that, but ultimately it's up to council where we go with that in terms of policy.
Because this is really an oxymoron. You can't have affordable housing on the most expensive land in your city. You know, I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
I think at the philosophical level, it does relate to the affordable living concept. But again, we need to see what the outcomes of the housing affordability strategy are going to be.
Okay.
We're making no commitments there. Okay,
so then on the Coquitlam, which, oh, the little thingy left. Hello, it's its little nose.
It thought your time was up, too.
No, I've got to ask these questions. These FTDAs, you say that the designation of future FTDAs will be determined through future planning. So when you do that, and if we, like Hazel Drive or something like that, if you did a little town center somewhere, I don't know where you might do one, do we have to go through the whole voting process in order to change a community to an FTDA?
For the audience at home, that's frequent transit development area. Mr.
I know, but
I know, you do.
Yes, it would be a Type 3 minor amendment that needs a 50% plus one vote of the Metro Board.
But no regional public hearing.
okay.
But does not require a regional public hearing.
And I guess I only have one more question, and that is, when we're doing population, one of the reasons we had to do all this was future population projections. And I noticed that Port Moody is trying to bring on 2 more areas of there. Were they in the original RGS, and would that, the fact that they can accept quite a few thousand in those 2 areas, would that accept our projection?
Your Worship, my understanding of the situation right now in Port Moody, those were lands that were
Imperial Oil and Ioko.
In the Ioko, in the Petrocan site. I believe they were in the regional industrial land use designation.
But not population accepting. So
precisely. So what Port Moody was trying to do is, again, flag those that it should be explored that there's another opportunity for those lands. I do recall going back many, many years ago when we were dealing with the LRSP when I worked in Port Moody, those lands did not factor into Port Moody's population projections of the day. So You're right. There's an overall regional pie, and it was divvied up between Coquitlam here and Richmond there and Port Moody. So those lands coming on may, well, that's still some time off. It would require reconsideration of that whole population pie.
Good. That's all I need to know. Thank you very much. And thank you. Where were you last year when I needed?
You've satisfied Councillor Reid. That's enough.
Thank you.
Actually, I do want to raise one question. This is what page? Schedule B, page 4, middle, it says reduce parking in frequent transit development areas. In some of the other portions of the same table, it says reduce parking requirements. Now, I assume that it always meant parking requirements, not to reduce the actual physical amount of parking, but rather the requirement for parking. Do we know if that's the case?
Yes, it is requirements.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to bring it up unless Councillor Reid already brought it up. Okay. The motion is on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item, item 6, concerns a water conservation program updates and bylaw amendments related to water shortage response plan bylaw number 3701. The staff recommendations that council give first, second, and third readings of the water shortage response plan amendment bylaw number 4378, and the general manager of engineering and public works has some introductory comments.
And thanks, Your Worship. Just very briefly, the water shortage response plan, it will be to continue with education and outreach, continue the toilet rebate program. It's been very successful. Continue with the rain barrel water-wise kits. The toilet replacement program will now have an online application process available, so it should make that process easier and more user-friendly, although we will certainly take applications the traditional way by paper and over the counter. And just a commentary on the bylaw amendments themselves are really more or less housekeeping matters, and that's to bring this particular bylaw into compliance with the BEN enforcement and adjudication system. This water shortage response bylaw was first written under the old municipal ticket information MTI system, and so that's why we're bringing these bylaw amendments forward. Thank you.
The enormous reach of the internet, we can now replace our toilets online.
Really?
Yep. Any discussion? Councillor Reid.
Thank you. On Schedule 4, this is where we're getting sort of desperate here. This is where we, you're not allowed to sprinkle your lawn, you're not allowed to do hardly anything. And the fourth bullet tells us the hand washing of vehicles is restricted to features required for safety, but number 6 says that you can wash a boat or a motorcycle, so I think we need to get rid of bullet 6 on Schedule 4, unless I'm reading it incorrectly.
Your Worship, just at a high level, I haven't gone through the detail yet on Schedule 4. I'll have to still look at that carefully. Schedule 4 refers to Stage 3 restrictions, and the water shortage plan is a staged plan where there's a Stage 1 and then 2 and then 3, and becomes increasingly more restrictive.
I understand that.
So okay, thank you. So is it the fourth bullet that?
No, the last one.
Oh, the last one. Sorry, I went washing up.
Can't wash your car if you're not allowed to. Because the 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth bullet says you can only wash the windows and headlights and licenses. Right?
You're on the right Schedule 4. I don't.
So just to be clear, the very last bullet.
Yeah, on Schedule 3, you can wash your car. When you get to Schedule 4,
Sorry.
it says you can only wash the headlights and the windows. And then in the last bullet, it says you can wash your whole car. So what's the point of just... The fifth bullet, Councillor O'Neill says it's restricted to safety. So then that means you can't wash the whole car. So we better fix that up before we go and ticket somebody for doing something they're not supposed to be doing. And on Schedule 5, I thought water play parks were recycled water. Do they not just have a little reservoir?
Water play parks, Your Worship, often have makeup water, and that's quite likely the reason for a Stage 4 restriction on the water play parks. So they would actually be consuming potable water in order to operate.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so that's the only thing I would suggest on Schedule 4, and I'm happy. Does that make sense to anybody else?
So, Your Worship, I'm sorry. I need to drill down and ask more questions in order to understand this. Is it the very last bullet that is problematic?
Look at Schedule 4.
Okay, go to Schedule 4. Okay.
So things are getting drastic now if we're on Schedule 4. So go down 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth bullet says that hand washing of vehicles is restricted to features required for safety.
Right.
Done. And then the sixth bullet says that when you're washing your boat or motor vehicle, your hose must be equipped, so you're not supposed to be washing them there.
Got it. We're restricting the washing of cars, but not restricting necessarily the washing of boats or other vehicles, except with a with a spring-loaded device.
No, the fifth bullet applies to vehicles. The seventh bullet applies to vehicles.
If I could clarify, my understanding of this is that you can only use a hose with an automatic shutoff, and you can only use it for the headlights.
No, Mr. Steblin, item 5, bullet 5 says you cannot wash a vehicle other than the windows and headlights. And item 7 says when you're washing the rest of the vehicle, you must use a shutoff on your hose.
It doesn't say the rest of the vehicle. It says when washing a motor vehicle, and the only part of the motor vehicle you're allowed to wash is the headlights.
Have you ever washed headlights with a hose with a shutoff valve?
That's what this says. Now, it may not make sense, but that's what this
No,
says.
it does not make sense.
Mr. Clerk, save us.
Before the bylaw passes, it does require fourth reading, which requires a report back to council. I think staff can go away and look into this and provide some clarity. And if there's a need for amendment at fourth reading, it can be provided in the fourth reading report.
Move 3 readings. Oh, okay.
I have one other. On Schedule 5, which is Stage 4, I wish the schedule's on Schedule 5, which applies to Stage 4, it has 2 conflicting ones. The second bullet says the watering is prohibited by any method, and the next bullet says drip irrigation is also prohibited, but any method is prohibited. Now, drip irrigation is the most efficient use of water as far as irrigation goes. What does drip irrigation apply to on the third bullet that isn't included in the second bullet already?
There you go, same as the cars.
Unless.
Yep, no, I get your point. This is, from Metro, but what we can do is provide some clarifying commentary and possibly even propose changes to those schedules for Coquitlam use.
Your Worship, are these from Metro?
Yes.
Well, perhaps for every mistake we find, we could get 1 free pass in the RGS.
Okay, then I've got another one. Because the sixth bullet on the same Schedule 5, which is Stage 4, some of these don't seem to exempt, say, a water fountain that's self-funding or self-supplying, recirculating. Well, you can't have a fountain in Stage 3, but if it's not being supplied by potable water. So I wonder where is the exemption for non-potable water, for stored water? For example, we have rain barrels in our community. I've got one in my home. I water my garden using the rain barrel, although the bylaw, I guess, would prohibit me from doing that. So I'm not sure what the rain barrel's for. Anyway, I'll leave that with staff.
We have no rain in the water shortage.
I got some in the rain barrel. I can lend you some. Okay. Councillor O'Neill.
Boy, those are really interesting questions that you guys have raised. Good catches. And you know what, the thought struck me that the first two ones for Schedule 4 and Schedule 5 essentially dealt with redundancies, and then it hit me that this is coming from Metro Vancouver, and I think there was general agreement on our last discussion that there's general redundancies with Metro Vancouver's planning process. So anyway, so it's just fitting. Yeah. So off of that little trifle. So given that this is a question for the General Manager, this is related to water shortage and projected water shortages. And given that this council has said many times that it's outcome oriented, my colleague who's not here tonight is always outcome oriented, and you know, show me the facts and the outcome and everything like that. And so I'm going to follow up on that sort of thing and say, well, okay, so how are we doing as a city in handling our water usage? Well, there's nothing in this report. We certainly succeeded in selling rain barrels, water-wise kits, electronic water timers, and replacing toilets, and that's some outcomes. But the real outcome that we're all interested in is water usage. Do we have any statistics for our water usage from last year?
Mr. Suzak.
Your Worship, the last broad study done by Metro, I'm not sure how old, I'm not sure if this is last year's stats or not, indicated that the residential per capita water use within the city of Coquitlam was among the lowest in the Metro region. My recollection is that our per capita water use was actually very, very close to the city of Langley. I don't have the numbers, you know, top of mind, but I'm quite happy to bring forward an information report on per capita water use in the city of Coquitlam.
Well, I found the stats for the 2011 usage, but I didn't find them for 2012. So 2011 was actually good. I mean, the system seems to be working. In 2011, our water usage, real water usage, was back at 1995 levels, even though our population is up about 20 or 25%. So there's a whole bunch of graphs on the Greater Vancouver Water District, Metro Vancouver website, and the Water District, and this one is quite interesting. It does show us having a peak several years ago and coming down, but I'm not sure. I want to know if we're still on that downward trend or not. So there's, I don't know if there's stats for last year. So, but the trend has been water usage going down overall, not just per capita, but overall water usage. Even as our population grows, water usage is going down.
Well, I will offer, I'm on a utilities committee at Metro, and we have actually there have been questions raised about Coquitlam's water usage because it's lower than many of the other jurisdictions. And at the same time, Coquitlam often is criticized because we don't have water meters. And so we quite immediately pipe up that water meters must consume a lot of water because we don't have them, and we have among the lowest water consumption. Although in 2011, I know the fire department used more than its fair share.
Yeah.
Just a comment, just for information, Your Worship. Coquitlam has probably the best low-flow toilet rebate program in the Lower Mainland. Toilets can account to up to 20 to 25% of domestic water consumption. And my view is that the program that Coquitlam has had for years for low-flow toilet replacement has gone a long way toward minimizing per capita water use in Coquitlam. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you. How do you control car washes? In other words, you know, we have the gas stations have car washes. We have some that are not that are in buildings for car washes using a lot of water. How do you control that?
I'd have to read the schedules, Your Worship, but I believe car washes are regulated under this water shortage response plan. They would be restricted as time goes on. All institutional, commercial, and industrial properties, which would include car washes, are on metered water.
Yes.
So there's an internal incentive for them to not be wasting it because they are paying for every measured cubic meter. So generally speaking, they are recycling their wash water.
not the car washes that I know that have recycling water. They're using a great amount of water, and the fact is, I know they're metered, but you mean to say you're going to drive up to the car wash, and the guy will say, sorry, we used up all the water for today, you'll have to come back tomorrow.
Well, it won't even be that. At Schedule 5, they'll be closed for the month of August or whatever. Because the car
wash will be closed
Yeah.
for 1 month?
Well, it says that in Stage 4 restrictions, Bullet 5, that washing of vehicles using any method, including at commercial car washes, is prohibited.
That's pretty frightening, you know, I mean, I can, you know.
If I could give a little bit of history, Stage 4, it's not a month-by-month basis. It's when the reservoirs run dry, and Stage 3 is when things are getting really bad but are not urgent. And so what this is really saying is you can have commercial car washes until Stage 4, which is then an emergency, and then all commercial car washes will be shut down. But I do not believe we've ever got to Stage 4.
Full circumstance, yeah.
So this is a little scary then.
This is if the reservoirs are running dry and there's going to be no water left in the pipes shortly. That's when you go to Stage 4. And I don't believe that we've ever gone to Stage 4. I can remember when these stages came in about 15 years ago, and I think it was in 91 or 81. Somewhere way back then when they first came up with this, because it was a very long, dry summer, and the reservoirs were getting low, and everybody was getting worried, and then they got into these concept of stages. And at the very extreme stage, basically, it's emergency, and the commercial car washes would be shut down. But we do not expect we would ever get there unless climate change happens and there's no more water.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And what are the chances of that, eh? Councillor Reid. Councillor Reid, your microphone is now on.
Well, at least the citizens know what to do.
No commercial car washes. You can only wash your headlights, and only with a hose that's spring-loaded. That's what it is. So we're in real bad shape then.
And not through drip irrigation, apparently, either.
I can't wait to read the minutes.
Jocularity considered.
Yes.
Okay. Tell you what we're going to do. Does anyone else have anything to say before Councillor Reid? No? Councillor Reid, did you have anything? No. Couldn't get it out. Okay. Councillor Reid moved a motion. It wasn't seconded, but I welcome a seconder. I'd say I'm going to take Councillor Sikora because he was trying to move it. There we go. All in favor? Opposed? Third reading is carried unanimously. And it's all water under the bridge.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's the last formal item on this agenda, which has been passed unanimously to date.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Nicholson to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We will have a